session for this afternoon. Mr. Nick Castelline, the 2017 Toastmaster of the Year, competition winner in many categories as well. So the accolades go on and on and on, just like every other Toastmaster that comes in front of us. Now we've got the how of being an evaluator. What a fantastic way to do things, because this is another part of the evaluation process where we can get the information that we need to do with the how of the evaluation. So Nick, I'll pass it over to you and let's enjoy the rest of this afternoon with this session. Thank you, Nick.
All right, thank you, Joe, and welcome everyone. There's a structure that's often used in evaluations called the what, why, how structure, and that what, why, how kind of informed the way that we put together the agenda for this this session that we're having today. So I wanted to initially ask a question, if someone can, and anyone can reply via the chat. What, why, how are obviously just one word, but when we talk about the evaluation structure of what, why, how, what's the rest of the question? So what's the rest of the what? What's the what of that structure? Give a moment to... What the speaker did well, what was good or not good, what did I observe, what did the speaker do? So those last couple are the broadest expression of it. What did I observe? What happened? What am I observing about this speech that I'm going to be commenting on? All right, what's the rest of the why question? That's probably the hardest one, I think. What's the rest of the why question? All right, that's pretty good expression that we've got from Chris there and from the Sergeant at Arms, Lucy. Why does it matter? Why this impacted the experience of the speech? Yeah, why are they giving the speech is not quite it, though. It's an important question that you need to ask yourself. Why are they giving this speech? Because the purpose of the speech will inform everything that you evaluate about it. But yeah, why did it work or not work? Why was it effective or not effective at achieving the purpose of the speech? And so obviously, yes, that question about what was the purpose of the speech, why did they give the speech, that's the starting point. What were they trying to achieve? Why did the thing that you observed impact or not impact their achievement of that purpose? Okay, what about then the final question, the how? What's the rest of the how? Now, slightly different between commendation and a recommendation, but I'm sure you'll put some wonderful things in the chat. All right, what could they have done differently, better? How was this done, or how could it have been done, from Annette? How was it done? How could it have been done? Yeah, exactly right. So we make an observation, that's the what. I observed that this speaker didn't make eye contact with the audience. Why does that matter for the effectiveness of this speech? Well, consequently, we didn't have that sense that the speaker was communicating with us personally, and that kind of gave us license as an audience to also disengage, also just look at the floor or look at our phones or whatever. And so that's why it matters. How then? How could this speaker start making eye contact with the audience? Well, obviously, you just look at the audience, right? It's not that hard, is it? But actually, the how can be really challenging, because we know that for all of us, giving a speech is really quite an intense experience. It's a continuous, intense experience for 7 minutes or 10 minutes or however long we're speaking for. Our minds have to be going the whole time. We're continually providing content and ideas, and we're continually broadcasting a lot of things with our facial expressions, with our physical. We're broadcasting things about our feelings and things about the ideas that we're communicating. There's the ideas themselves. And that whole time we're retrieving everything from our memory and we're trying to control all of these things. And we're probably a bit worried about how we're going to be received. So we've got this other voice that's completely irrelevant going along at the same time saying you're stuffing this up or you're doing this well, or what does that person think? And did you leave the oven on? So we've got a lot going on during a speech. And it's pretty difficult during that to also be thinking, what am I doing with my eyes? Am I looking? I'm doing it at the moment. I keep looking at my own camera because everyone does that on Zoom instead of looking at you because you're all there, right, at my camera. So what are we doing with our eyes? That's a pretty hard thing to think about during a speech. So the how in an evaluation, how can this be done? How was it done for a commendation, or how could it have been done for a recommendation? It's a pretty challenging thing to address. And most of the time, as a new speaker, as a new evaluator, you'll be starting with the subjective. And so you start with just, I saw the speech and I felt this, or I thought this. I didn't understand this bit. I did understand that. Something seemed wrong about this. And so we start with the subjective, but as we gain experience and as we want to add additional value to the speaker that we're evaluating, we really want to learn how to give that how, to say how you can become the best speaker that you could become. And so that's what we're going to be discussing during this session. And so the way I've planned this, please continue to put things in the chat. Occasionally I'll look over at the chat and just see if there's any questions that have come up. Perhaps, Sue, if you see something come up in the chat that you think is worth interrupting me for, then go ahead, just speak, that'll be all right. But I don't want anyone to feel licensed to speak or it'll be pandemonium. And what we're going to do first, I've got a few brainstorming sessions. So I'm going to share my screen and we're going to work our way through to giving the how. But what we're going to start with is just thinking about what some of the what is going to be. What are some of the things that we could observe in a speech that we're evaluating? So this being a brainstorm, I don't know if I can share my screen and see the chat at the same time. So maybe, Sue, if you can read things out from the chat as they come up, and if people are brave, you can speak at this point. So what are some observations that we can make? You're evaluating a speech, you see what?
Okay. Can you see that
while I'm doing this?
All right. Structure, body language, grammar, tone. Ooh. I couldn't understand all the words. Body language, vocabulary, eye contact. Okay, vocal variety.
I'm going to make vocal the heading there. If you can notice, I'm spotting some headings.
Nervous hand clasping, ringing, content. What did Nick say about what happens during speeches? Continuous. Use of speaking area. Confidence. Use of visual aids. Looking nervous. Gestures. Quivering voice. Pace.
Quivering voice. Pace. I missed something in there.
Did you get eye contact?
Yeah, I've got that. Yep.
Yep. Impact. Pausing.
I will let this go a little bit longer.
Confidence.
Confidence. I think that was the one I missed earlier.
Transition.
Actually, let's put that under structure.
The message.
Anything else under there yet?
the message.
Yep.
You got looked nervous.
Yes.
Understanding subject matter. Power pause.
Power pause. Crikey. That's a
Emoting.
special sort of pause right there. Emoting. Oh, I like that. I'm just
What's
gonna
in it?
put
What's in it for me?
Yeah.
Matching content to audience. Signature phrase. Lack of preparation. Attention grabbing introduction.
Ooh.
Audience interaction. Filler words / ahs.
Filler words / ahs. Oh yeah.
Take home message. Structure, start, middle, end.
All right, I'm going to stop you there because my hands are going to fall off.
I've got two more. Last two was you did or did not meet your brief / project objective. And the final one is X factor, positive energy.
Yeah, actually, I like some of those are conclusions that you can draw. Oh, I've run out of room. That's gonna have to be it.
Yep.
So in a sense, the things that we can observe content, body language, vocal, and structure, and then from that we can make inferences, such as we can conclude that the person was nervous. We might conclude that the person had a lot of energy, but that energy is actually communicated through all of these other things. Similarly, achievement of aims, if we look at these things, the structure, the body language, the voice, and the content, and then we say, did they or did they not achieve what they were setting out to achieve? And so these are the sort of 4 families of observations that we make. I like to think of them in this way. So just briefly look at each one. The structure really is about having that opening body conclusion, how they've done transitions between ideas. Within each point then, the opening, the body, and the conclusion, within each one there's a microstructure, which can be done in a lot of different ways. The 2 sort of families of it that I think of, one is inductive and one is deductive. So inductive is when you start with your point and then you give all of your reasoning and all the supporting material around it. Deductive, you give all of the reasoning and eventually come through to the point. So it can be more suspenseful, but it's also, it can be more difficult to do because people sometimes, if they're just hearing all these reasons but haven't heard the point yet, they can be wondering what's going on. So structure, really about having that opening body conclusion and a transition. And structure is most strongly linked to content, right? Structure and content kind of work together, that the structure needs to be designed to support the content and the intent of the speech. And so if the intent of the speech is to inform, then really we're looking at the conclusion to be a summary that summarizes the information, and so that everyone is hit with the information as the end of the speech. If it's a speech about entertaining, then really you're looking much more at the journey and the way that it keeps people engaged along the way. And most likely the conclusion will be some kind of climax or twist. If your purpose is to inspire or motivate, then the conclusion needs to be that take-home message that really says, this is why I gave the speech, this is what you should do, or this is what you should desire to be. The opening, likewise, the important thing about an opening is that you get everyone's attention, obviously, but you do that just by starting to talk, but that you actually get everyone's buy-in, that you really give everyone a reason to keep listening. Either because you've created, like for a story, you've created the suspense, you've created the problem, and they need to work their way through the story to understand the resolution of that problem. And so in a story, you're establishing the motivation of the characters and why there's some kind of problem in their way. If it was an informative speech, and most of our speeches are probably in the informative or motivational, then the opening, you're telling them why this information is relevant to them, why it's interesting, why it's unique, why it's something that they would want to know about. So that's structure. I'm just giving a bit of a fly through here, and we're going to drill down into some of these a bit more. Body language, I've got 5 points of body language that helps me to remember it. So I start with the eyes and work outwards. Eye contact, facial expression is one that we haven't said here. Then working your way outwards, you've got essentially gestures, your hands and your arms and how you use those. Next step out is actually your stance and posture. And then finally movement, and so the movement of your whole body. So it works its way out in scale. And those 5 points help me to think of everything encompassed by body language. Voice, I've also got 5 points for voice that help me to remember that one, and they all start with P. So it's pitch, which hasn't been mentioned particularly. Pitch, pace, pause, power, which is essentially volume, but I had to make it start with a P, so it had to be power. And finally, personality, which essentially is kind of encaptures everything that you can't pin down scientifically. Like scientifically, you can say that's a pause. They weren't speaking for 0.75 seconds. Pitch, you can get out a frequency meter and you can measure their pitch. Power, you can measure their volume. Pace, you could say how many words a minute, but then there's something that we can't really capture scientifically as such, and it's just how they're communicating their personality, and it's really is captured in that word tone, or attitude, or manner. It's hard to pin down. If you look at the judging criteria, it's called manner, really. They call it manner. But I had to start with a P, so it was personality. And finally, content. So this is a good point at which to give a bit of a warning, which is when we evaluate content, we are not evaluating whether we agree or disagree with the content. That's kind of a Toastmasters rule, because we want to be establishing the skill of communication. We don't want to be imposing some kind of orthodoxy on everyone saying what they have to communicate. And so people can talk about whatever they want. That doesn't mean we can't evaluate content, because the content of a speech needs to communicate the value of the speech to us. And so you can observe that within the content of a speech, there was humor, or there wasn't humor, but it could have benefited from humor, could have benefited from being lighthearted. You can note the emotional ups and downs in a speech. You can note the logical coherence. The different tools that people have used to communicate, they'll use rhetorical devices like alliteration. If you start every word in a sentence with the same letter, or a number of words with the same letter, we can use rhetorical questions. That's an aspect of content. It doesn't matter whether you agree with the message or not. You can still evaluate, essentially, the strategy by which that message was delivered. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about content.
Nick, there's a couple of comments.
Yep.
In the chat box. Some in regard to pass or fail in the project brief, and just wondered if you want to have a quick look at the other questions there.
Okay, so I can see the chat now. There's a lot of things there. Didn't mention fail, pass, just how they feel you went against the objectives of the speech. Yeah, okay, that's a fair question. It depends very much on the context of your evaluation. But I guess you're talking particularly about a Toastmasters meeting. Do you give a fail, pass assessment to the speaker? I have a bit of a history or reputation in some circles about this, because I have attempted to do that before. I said to someone, you delivered a speech and I don't think you met the objectives. I would recommend you do it again. But I've allowed them to make the choice whether they did it again or not, because Toastmasters is self-paced, self-motivated. We don't give out certificates, and it's not run by professionals. We don't have a marking system. And so Within Toastmasters, I think you're obliged, if someone's done the speech, to sign it off. But if you want them to maximize their potential and to maximize the learning opportunity of the speech, you can recommend that they repeat it and say, you know, I don't think you actually got everything that you could have out of it, or put in everything that you could have put into it. So I think that's fair to say. And hopefully that answers the intent of that question as well. Something about I'd rather be told that than have a whitewash evaluation. Yeah, well, definitely. I think one issue that some people have experienced in Toastmasters is they think that CRC means positive, negative, positive. And I say the CRC structure is positive, 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 because a recommendation is a positive thing. And in fact, you will block your mind off from possible things and recommendations you could give if you think what was bad about this speech. That is the wrong question. Ask what this speech could have done. What could be? It has to be an exercise of the imagination. So if you see things that were blocking the effectiveness, obviously they're highest priority. If someone did something that was actually impeding the effectiveness of their speech, then that's going to go to the top of your priority list. Tell them, this is something that I think you need to work on because it's actually getting in the way of your communication. But if the speech was basically effective, then you've got to actually ask something from your imagination. You've got to say, what could this speech have done? What could it have done better? So two ways to look at that. And I'm starting to deviate from my plan here a little bit, but on the one hand, there's the speech itself. And you can say, this speech, what could this speech have done and achieved and been? And then there's the speaker. And you say, where's this speaker heading? What are they going to achieve or try in the future? And sometimes I've said, this is a great speech. You've done really well. It was a great informative speech, but I've only ever seen you give informative speeches. And I think that you're in a comfort zone here. For you to grow, you need to try and give an entertaining speech or a motivational speech. That's going to stretch you as a speaker. Now, that's not a recommendation related to the speech, but related to the speaker. So you can look at both of those and you're looking for opportunities for growth. How could that speaker improve themselves? And how could that speech have been improved? That's not to say the speech was bad, but to say how it could have been good. So make sure that when you're thinking recommendation, you're thinking of them as a positive thing. Okay, so we've brainstormed a number of whats. You're watching your speech and you see a number of different things, and that's the what. You say, I saw eye contact. I saw that you used, or I heard that you used humor. I observed that the speech was really well structured. I knew where it was going the whole time. Or I observed that your voice was quite soft, and so I couldn't actually hear everything that you were saying. You know, all of these things, they're whats. But we want to get through eventually to the how. And before we can get there, we actually need to ask another why. We need to ask another why. And this is, why did the speaker deliver the speech that they did? Because if you really want to become a very valuable evaluator, you need to make some attempt at essentially diagnosing. Sometimes this is really simple to do. You'll observe a speaker and you'll observe a cluster of things that tell you a really simple story. You'll observe that their voice was soft and occasionally quavery, that their legs were shaking, that they didn't move around on the stage, that they didn't look at everyone. You say, well, that cluster of things, I know how to diagnose that. This person's nervous, right? That's a pretty easy diagnosis to make. But you can observe the same thing and have different diagnoses at different times. It could be, for instance, you observe someone, just say it's a soft voice, someone speaking with a soft voice. It might be that they're nervous. Or it could be force of habit, that they always speak with a soft voice. That's just what they do. It could be a physical condition that they have. They can't speak loud. That's possible. It equally could be that there's just too much going on in a speech and they can't focus on it. They aren't even aware of it. Or it could be they did it intentionally because they thought that it would make the speech more intense. But all it achieved was actually to make the speech a bit weaker in energy. So that's one observation with 4 or 5 different possible diagnoses. Those diagnoses will inform what that speaker needs to do next time to improve. If they did it deliberately, they've already got control of their voice. And so you need to just tell them, I think you should speak louder. Bam. But if they're dealing with nervousness and you just tell them, I think you should speak louder, that might not be the most useful thing. That can be a really difficult thing for someone who's nervous to do. Ultimately, they need to conquer their nerves, and you can probably give them far more specific and useful ideas about nervousness than you could just about volume. So I am going to do another bit of a brainstorming session here. And what I want us to do is to pick one of the observations from each of those squares, and we're just going to think about the first thing we're going to do is what is the specific thing that we may observe. So I'll go back to that Word document. And now we'll go down to the next page. Don't know if you can see the pop-ups coming up on my screen. Hopefully not. All right, so specific observations. So let's say eye contact. We've spoken about it a few times. Eye contact is a fairly broad area. And I've heard evaluators say, just as a throwaway, my first combination is you had good eye contact. But what's good eye contact? Eye contact can vary in a lot of different ways. So what's some specific things that you might observe about eye contact? What's some specific observations? Let's try and get 4. I'm going to have to use Sue when she's finished coughing as my speaker again for this one. Oh, we got some things up in the chat already.
Can you see the chat, or do you want me to go?
I can't see it. So I can't see it while I share screen, unfortunately.
Sure. Okay. So let's see. Look straight at the audience, straight to the audience.
Mm-hmm.
Steady. 3-second rule for effective eye contact.
Ooh.
Made eye contact with all audience members. Have a preferred direction to look. Another one is looking at all members of the audience. Able to speak without looking at notes.
All right, so there's a few different things we've touched on there, that different specific observations you could make. So one is looking at the audience, or if it was a recommendation, it could be the person was looking at the ceiling or looking at the floor. And I've known speakers that do both of those things. One, some speakers have been given a recommendation to look over the audience at the back wall. Now, that recommendation applies when you have a large audience in a hall, because you look over everyone and everyone assumes you're looking at someone kind of behind them. It works. When you are in a Toastmasters room and you have one row of people, they know that there's no people on the back wall. You're not looking at the audience. They can tell. So looking up, looking down, looking at the audience. Where are you looking? Some people, it's the whole speech looking down. Others, they just keep looking when they're thinking. And so they keep looking at the ground and then coming back to the audience. All right. Steady. So some people are continuously changing who they're looking at. It's kind of frenetic. Some people develop a pattern to it, like an oscillating fan. Other people, are a little bit more natural about it, varying who they look at. Okay, looking at all audience members or having a preferred direction. Yeah, so sometimes due to the orientation of the room, often someone finds that on this side of the room, there's a couple of people looking back at them and giving them some pretty positive vibes. And so they just keep looking back at those people and they forget the other half of the room. And that can develop really early in a speech, that audience bias. You've got to watch it. If you keep looking at the side of the room that's not looking at you, eventually you'll catch them looking at you and they'll keep looking, because you're looking back at them. The 3-second linger. So 3 seconds, I think if you were capable of counting out an actual 3 seconds in a speech, time passes differently when you're speaking, thankfully. But if you were to count out actual 3 seconds, that's way too long to look at one person. That's going to be getting uncomfortable. And I imagine all of you at some stage would have been that person who was like the favorite audience member of the speaker. It's really uncomfortable. If you're a nice Toastmaster, then you will happily take that role of being that person's, comfort prop during that speech. And so you'll look back at them and you'll smile and you'll look interested and you go, man, I wish they were looking at someone else. Okay, and I think the last one, of course, is managing notes. Eye contact when you've got notes is a whole different skill. It's challenging to balance the two and still engage with the audience as much as you would want to be. So really good. There's a whole lot of detail we can extract just from the idea of eye contact. And so it's worthwhile in a evaluation thinking specifically what was the issue with the eye contact, not just it was good or it was bad, but getting a little bit more value out of it, extracting that value. All right, what about, let's look at something to do with voice. I've already discussed volume. That was my example before. So how about we talk about pace? Pace, and you can talk about rhythm as well if you like, or rhythm or cadence. I think I actually even spelt rhythm right just then. It's a bit of a first. All right, so any ideas in the chat yet about pace, rhythm, cadence, these issues, Sue?
Passion.
Passion, I like it.
Speaking very fast.
Yeah.
Variation. Too fast, too slow.
Yep.
Inconsistent. Appropriate pauses.
Mm-hmm.
You sped up when you saw the red light.
Yeah, exactly the opposite of what you should do at a real red light. All right, so that's plenty of points that we've got there, and already we've made some observations. Someone's pointed out really that in terms of using pace to actually support your message, it can provide passion. Varying pace provides interest in a speech. But then the word inconsistent, when I heard that, sounded like a negative connotation, that actually sort of unusual varying of pace might be distracting or weird if it wasn't coherent with the message. I like varying pace. I find it a really powerful tool. And you can use it for the overall structure of the speech. The faster bits are a bit more energetic. You can use it locally as well. So commonly, if you're giving supporting material, kind of like what I'm doing at the moment, this is just ongoing discussion of the issue. You'll speak at a relatively fast pace, and what I'm currently doing is about 120 words a minute. But when you come to the main point, you pause before and after, and you slow down, and that can get the message across very effectively. So varying your pace just locally can really add emphasis to the areas that you want to. Appropriate pauses. So pauses before and after a phrase really do give it a lot of weight. Excessively long pauses, you're starting to give away the fact that you can't work out what you're saying next. And pauses in odd spots. Some people sort of pause between every word. That can be a little bit unusual. Speeding up at the red light, pretty obvious motive for that. You want to finish the speech and you've discovered that you set the wrong pace at the beginning. So that can happen to anyone. And I guess at some point you have to make a kind of decision whether you're going to compromise your content or your pace. So yeah, pace, rhythm, cadence can be a really interesting thing to observe. And all of the different areas of voice and of body language, they have two effects that we can observe about them. One is they will impact the effectiveness of the communication process. So too fast, too slow, that's a judgment based on your ability to actually understand or your ability to maintain attention, right? That's impacting the communication process. And so, yeah, if you speak too fast, people might not understand what you're saying, especially if that's combined with, say, an accent commonly, that will make it more difficult to understand. Too slow, you get bored, you'll tune out. It's just too slow. The other thing you can look at, so that's impacting communication process. The other one is what it communicates. So communicating in terms of the message and its coherence with the message. And that's what I spoke about earlier. Speeding up for supporting material, slowing down for key points, and also matching the energy, the mood, the emotion of that part of the speech. So we can make all these observations just from the one observation. We're drilling down to get to the diagnosis. Why did it happen? Why did the speaker do this? Okay, let's do two more of these. So with regards to structure, oh, that's a challenging one. Let's pick the opening of the speech. What are some observations you could make about the opening of the speech? I like to use the phrase opening rather than introduction, just because when we speak about introduction, we're often talking actually about what the Toastmaster says before you start your speech. So it's just a way to keep them distinct. All right, anything coming up in the chat yet, Sue, for the opening?
Yep. Did the speaker grab my attention in the first 8 seconds?
Oh, sounds like someone's got a bit of science behind that. You've got 8 seconds. That's how long you've got.
Gained interest? Does it let us know what to expect?
Yeah.
You opened with a question that grabbed attention. Unexpected.
Okay.
Did the title work for me?
I like that because it's linking the things together throughout the speech.
Loud and sudden.
Make a whole. Sorry, what was the last one?
Loud and sudden.
Loud and sudden. I know someone who likes to start their speeches loud and sudden.
So do I.
Okay, now I think of it, I know too, Sue. Yeah, so someone who likes to come out and just literally jump on the spot and jump in front of you and say some big, bold phrase. Okay, so again, some observations we've made about the opening. Obviously, everyone was listening earlier, or everyone knows this about speeches, that the key thing with the opening is getting your audience's buy-in and setting up their expectations for the rest of the speech. And if you don't achieve that, if you don't achieve the situation where the audience actually wants to know or feels a compulsion to know what's going to happen next, what's the rest of the speech going to contain for them, then they may drift away and you'll lose their attention. So gaining their attention at the opening of the speech with the content that you include. Then we've got some examples of things that people can do to achieve this. Rhetorical question, obviously, is a good device for making the audience think about why they want to know some bit of information, because they're wondering what the answer will be. Doing something unexpected or loud and sudden, and also realizing that the title of the speech has established some expectations already. And so sometimes you can kind of play the opening against the title, have a title that's interpreted in a new way. It had a phrase in it that set up one expectation and you broke it, and that was kind of funny and interesting. So a lot of opportunities there for the opening. Were there any last ones there, Sue, in the chat? Or?
Dialogue.
Oh, as in sort of like artificial two-person dialogue.
Relive, don't relive, don't retell.
Ah, that's an interesting concept. There's a lot in that. All right, let's go to the final one here. So this is sort of to do with content, speaking from memory. Or, well, let's look at the opposite. Let's look at notes. What are some observations that you can make regarding the use or lack of use of notes? Well, they're coming in thick and fast.
Yeah, is a distraction? Is it a distraction? Positioning, where the notes were held. Use was not disruptive to content. Prepared or not. Reference them, don't read them. Ability to navigate the notes. During Zoom, noticing more people seem to be reading / reviewing notes. Authentic.
All right, I didn't realise that would open the floodgates.
And
we'll,
last two, is it a crutch or a tool? And 80% focus with audience.
80%. There's a lot of maths coming out here today. All these rules of thumb I didn't know. All right. So let's look then back through some of these the way we have in the other 3 points we've made. So there's a point here that essentially notes do rob you of opportunities to connect with your audience. That if you didn't have notes, then you're able to maintain 100% eye contact with the audience and 100% focus on the audience and on the way that you're delivering. And so they can be disruptive to the content. Then there's how you manage the notes themselves. Where do you put them? Are you holding them on cue cards? Are they on some big lectern that's covering your face? Are they a lectern off to the side and consequently you're turning around all the time? You know, there's kind of no magic bullets there, but there's better and worse ways of managing them so that they can not be a distraction to the audience and minimize their interruption to the flow. Then there's how you write your notes themselves. You know, are they in dot points? Are they something that you can just reference, or are they in sentences? Is it something you have to read? Are you using your notes to kind of protect you from a fear of losing your plot? And so they've become a crutch, or do you actually like having the lectern between you and the audience? And so you kind of like that barrier there. There's a lot of different ways to think about that. Ability to navigate notes is hugely important, and I'm surprised at how often people get it wrong. It's not that hard to have notes that are written nice and big in pages that you can't get out of order. And yet the number of times, you know, people go, oh, I've got the wrong page and they've written tiny letters and they've scribbled over them. And, you know, so ability to navigate your own notes and then cheating on it, that's just wrong, isn't it? I'm appalled as well, whoever said that. And remaining authentic, and so notes can make you seem somewhat artificial. Another thing that's really important is that we write differently to we speak. Written communication is different to spoken for a whole number of reasons. One is that people that are read about 300 words a minute on average. People that are speaking speak maybe up to 150. And so when we're speaking, words are coming out at half the rate. Not only that, someone who's reading, if they miss a word, they can look back again. When we're speaking, we can't do that. And so commonly when we speak, we're a bit less efficient, more conversational. Even in a professional environment, there's less sort of regulations on spoken compared to written. Written's usually in the impersonal third person if you're in the in science community, whereas you can speak in the first person, it's fine. So there's a lot of difference between spoken and written communication. And that can actually be a problem when people are initially writing speeches and they're used to writing essays. One other one is that in writing, we often use, I'm going to get the wrong word. I think it's impersonal pronouns. So things like it, he, she. So we use their name the first time, and after that, we're saying he. When we do spoken, we use them a lot less. will repeat the name. And the reason for that is if people didn't hear it the first time, they'll hear it the second time. It's not good joining a speech and hearing a person saying it all the time and you missed what it was and you don't have a clue what they're talking about. So all sorts of things that can impact the way we deliver when we're using notes. Is that a red light for my whole session, Sue? Oh my goodness. Well, we have covered so much. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen. All right, so let's bring this then to a close. I wanted to speak about specifics, but I do need to summarize then what's the message coming out of this. Knowing how to deliver something as a speaker is really important. And it's a challenging thing. And this is where we draw on our experience to deliver our evaluations. And what you need to do is to think back, as you've learned as a speaker, what are all just the most amazing practical things that just helped you deliver what you wanted to deliver? It's not just talking about the what, you know, you spoke louder. How did you achieve it? There's a lot of practical things. I wish we could spend time to cover them. Practicing, obviously, right up there, not just practicing reading your speech, but practicing delivering it. Finding the extremes in order to experience the normal. So this is, if someone's having difficulty speaking louder or softer during their speech, and you can't do this in a competition, but in your club, you could say, come up the front here, let's practice it, right? Make the loudest noise you can. And now make the softest noise you can. Right, they're the extremes. You're probably never going to make a noise that loud or that soft in a speech. You're going to use a smaller range. But you need to feel the big range to use the smaller range. Realizing that people sometimes have to learn things in steps. It's not you jump straight to expert, but you've got to try it in increments. Using notes is one of those obvious ones. Don't start by just throwing away the notes necessarily. Some people, they need to do that. They just need to throw away the blanket and give it a go. But sometimes you need to go to dot points, memorize the introduction, then try memorizing the whole. Deliver with persistence. You know, if you get up there and you've come to that point where you've planned to try speaking loud or to try moving on the stage and you're terrified, your feet feel like they're literally glued to the floor, do not go to the next part of your speech until you have moved. You know, and if you're evaluating someone, you tell them that. You say, you need to learn how to move on the stage. You're up to it. You have it in you. It's not like you don't have legs. So you need to move. And you come to that point in your speech, you don't read the next line until you've moved, all right? You know, and you make sure that if you deliver persistent, once you've done it once, you can do it again. So there's a whole lot of different things that are practical how advice, and collect them as you go through Toastmasters, and you will just get better and better and better at coaching and evaluating and helping other people improve and become the best speakers they can be. Thank you everyone for listening and putting up with my awful time management today. I hope that was valuable. I'm really looking forward to hearing Joe Kneebone round us all off in the next section. I'll hand back to our Toastmaster.
Thank you, Nick. Oh, that was a great information session, how you broke it all down. That was great. Hopefully everyone got lots out of that, and we'll keep moving from here on.